Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls in her small Texas town. While her classmates spent their afternoons at the mall or watching television, she could be found in her grandfather's garage, learning to fix engines or practicing martial arts moves she'd seen in movies. Her grandfather, a Vietnam veteran, had taught her that strength wasn't just about muscles. It was about mental toughness, discipline, and never giving up when others tried to break you down. The first real test came when Sarah was just 16 years old. Her family had moved to a military base where her father, a career Army officer, had been stationed. The base had a youth fitness program that was notoriously difficult, designed to prepare teenagers for potential military careers. Most kids lasted only a few weeks before quitting, but Sarah saw it as the perfect opportunity to prove herself. The program instructor, Sergeant Williams, was known for his harsh training methods and his belief that girls had no place in serious military preparation. From the moment Sarah walked into the gymnasium, she could feel his skeptical gaze following her every movement. The other participants, mostly teenage boys who had been training for months, snickered when she introduced herself and stated her intention to complete the full program. The first week involved basic physical training that pushed everyone to their limits. 5-mile runs in the scorching Texas heat, hundreds of push-ups and sit-ups, and obstacle courses that seemed designed to humiliate rather than train. Sarah's hands were covered in blisters within days, her muscles screamed in protest, and every night she collapsed into bed wondering if she could continue. But each morning, she forced herself to get up and return to the gymnasium. Sergeant Williams seemed determined to make her quit. He assigned her extra duties, criticized her form even when it was perfect, and made comments about how the program wasn't designed for delicate flowers. The other participants began to follow his lead, making jokes about her presence and betting on when she would finally give up. Sarah learned to ignore their taunts, focusing instead on the voice of her grandfather in her head, reminding her that proving yourself meant outlasting those who doubted you. The real turning point came during the third week when the group was learning combat techniques. Sergeant Williams paired Sarah with the strongest and most aggressive boy in the program. Was 6 feet tall, outweighed Sarah by 60 pounds, and had made it clear that he thought girls belonged in cheerleading, not combat training. The exercise was supposed to be controlled sparring, but had other ideas. As soon as they began, came at Sarah with unnecessary force, trying to overwhelm her with his size advantage. The other participants gathered around, expecting to see her quickly defeated and humiliated. But Sarah had spent years learning from her grandfather's stories and studying every military manual she could find. She understood that in real combat, size and strength meant nothing if you couldn't control your emotions and think strategically. Instead of trying to match aggression, Sarah remained calm and focused. She used his momentum against him, employed leverage techniques she'd practiced countless times, and waited for him to make mistakes. When lunged forward with too much force, Sarah used a simple hip throw that sent him crashing to the mat. The gymnasium fell silent as the largest, strongest participant lay on his back, staring up at the ceiling in shock. Sergeant Williams's expression changed from smugness to surprise, but he quickly recovered and ordered them to continue. Now embarrassed and angry, came at Sarah even more aggressively. This time she didn't just defend. She went on the offensive, demonstrating a series of moves that left flat on his back 3 more times in rapid succession. By the end of the session, every person in that gymnasium understood that Sarah Martinez was not someone to be underestimated. Word of the sparring session spread quickly around the base. Suddenly, the girl who had been dismissed as an attention-seeking teenager was being talked about in mess halls and training facilities. Some praised her skill and determination, while others insisted it had been luck or that had gone easy on her. Sarah didn't care about the gossip. She was focused on completing the program and proving that she belonged in any environment where strength and skill mattered. The remaining weeks of the youth program became a different kind of test. Now that she had demonstrated her physical capabilities, the challenges became more psychological. Sergeant Williams and some of the participants tried new tactics to break her resolve, questioning her motivations, suggesting she was trying too hard to be something she wasn't, and implying that real military life would be far more brutal than anything she had experienced. Sarah responded by throwing herself even more completely into the training. She volunteered for additional exercises, helped struggling participants with their technique, and maintained her performance standards even when fatigue and stress mounted. She began to notice that some of the boys who had initially mocked her were now watching her technique carefully, trying to learn from her approach to training. The final test of the program was a week-long survival exercise in the surrounding desert. Participants were divided into teams and given minimal supplies, with the goal of reaching a series of checkpoints while demonstrating their ability to work together under stress. Sarah's team included, and two other boys who had been among her harshest critics. The desert environment was unforgiving, with temperatures reaching over 100 degrees during the day and dropping to near freezing at night. Water and food were rationed, and the physical demands of hiking across rough terrain while carrying full packs pushed everyone to their breaking point. Within the first day, it became clear that Sarah's careful preparation and steady temperament made her a natural leader, even though none of her teammates wanted to admit it. When suffered heat exhaustion on the second day, it was Sarah who recognized the symptoms and implemented the treatment procedures she had memorized from her medical training books. When the team became lost on the third night, it was Sarah's navigation skills and calm decision-making that got them back on course. By the time they reached the final checkpoint, Even had grudgingly acknowledged that Sarah had probably saved his life and definitely saved their mission. The graduation ceremony for the youth program was held in the base's main auditorium, with families and commanding officers in attendance. Sarah's parents beamed with pride as Sergeant Williams announced that she had not only completed the program, but had achieved the highest overall scores in both physical performance and leadership evaluation. As he handed her the certificate, Sergeant Williams leaned close and whispered something that surprised her. "I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've never seen anyone work harder or show more heart. You're going to make an outstanding soldier someday." But Sarah's ambitions extended far beyond just becoming a soldier. During the final weeks of the program, she had been researching the most elite units in the military, studying their selection processes and the qualities they sought in candidates. One organization in particular had captured her imagination: the United States Navy SEALs. She knew that no woman had ever successfully completed SEAL training, and she understood that the physical and mental demands were considered among the most challenging in the world. That night, as her family celebrated her achievement with dinner at the base restaurant, Sarah made a decision that would shape the rest of her life. She was going to enlist in the Navy immediately after high school, and she was going to become the first woman to earn the SEAL Trident. Her father, initially shocked by her announcement, gradually began to smile as he recognized the same determination in her eyes that had driven his own military career. Her mother was more concerned, asking practical questions about the physical requirements and wondering if Sarah truly understood what she was committing to. Sarah's response was simple and direct. She had spent the last several months proving that she could succeed in environments where others expected her to fail, and she was ready for the ultimate test. The remaining months of high school passed quickly as Sarah intensified her training regimen. She worked with local trainers who had military backgrounds, studied every available resource about SEAL selection and training, and began building the kind of physical conditioning that would be required for the legendary Hell Week and the other challenges that lay ahead. Her grandfather, now in his 70s but still sharp and strong, became her primary mentor during this period. He shared stories from his own military service, taught her advanced techniques for mental resilience, and helped her understand that the real battle in elite military training wasn't against the instructors or the physical challenges. It was against her own doubts and limitations. On the day Sarah received her high school diploma, she also received her enlistment papers and shipping orders for Navy boot camp. As she packed her belongings and prepared to leave the only home she had known, she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness that reminded her of that first day in Sergeant Williams's gymnasium. The difference was that now she knew exactly what she was capable of achieving when others tried to test her limits. Navy boot camp at Great Lakes Naval Station was supposed to be a shock to the system for new recruits, but Sarah found herself surprisingly well prepared for the experience. The early morning wake-ups, intensive physical training, and constant pressure from drill instructors felt familiar after her experiences in the youth program. What surprised her was how many of her fellow recruits struggled with challenges she had learned to handle years earlier. During the 8 weeks of basic training, Sarah excelled in every category. Her physical fitness scores were consistently in the top 5%, her academic performance was outstanding, and her leadership potential was recognized by instructors who began giving her additional responsibilities. More importantly, she earned the respect of her fellow recruits, many of whom initially questioned what a relatively small woman was doing in their ranks. The defining moment of boot camp came during the final week when their company was assigned a grueling night navigation exercise. Each recruit had to find their way through several miles of unfamiliar terrain using only a compass and map, while carrying full gear and meeting strict time requirements. The exercise was designed to test individual skills under pressure, and failure meant recycling to another company and starting several weeks of training over again. Sarah completed the course faster than anyone in her company and was waiting at the finish line when other recruits began arriving. Several of them were clearly lost and approaching the time limit that would result in automatic failure. Without hesitation, Sarah requested permission from the supervising instructor to go back and help guide the struggling recruits to the finish line. The instructor was initially skeptical, pointing out that helping others could compromise her own standing. But Sarah insisted that real leadership meant ensuring the success of the entire team. She spent the remaining hour of the exercise moving through the course backwards, finding lost recruits and providing guidance that helped them reach the finish line within the time limit. By the end of the night, Sarah had personally assisted 7 different people in completing the course successfully. The next morning, her drill instructor announced that her actions demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership and selflessness that the Navy needed in its future sailors. Following boot camp graduation, Sarah was assigned to Navy A School for technical training before beginning the process of requesting assignment to SEAL preparation programs. She had learned that the path to SEAL training required multiple steps, including physical screening tests, psychological evaluations, and recommendations from commanding officers. Each step was designed to eliminate candidates who lacked the physical capability, mental toughness, or character necessary for the most demanding military operations. Her first major hurdle came during the physical screening test, a series of exercises that established minimum standards for SEAL candidates. The requirements included a 500-yard swim in 12.5 minutes, at least 50 push-ups in 2 minutes, 50 sit-ups in 2 minutes, 10 pull-ups with no time limit, and a 1.5-mile run in 10.5 minutes. These standards had been established based on decades of experience with male candidates, and no adjustments were made for women attempting the test. Sarah had been training specifically for these requirements for months, but she knew that meeting the minimum standards wouldn't be enough. SEAL instructors were looking for candidates who could exceed every requirement by significant margins, demonstrating that they possessed the physical reserves necessary for the far more demanding training that lay ahead. On the day of her test, she completed the swim in 11 minutes, performed 75 push-ups and sit-ups, completed 15 pull-ups, and finished the run in 9 minutes and 30 seconds. Her performance attracted immediate attention from the SEAL liaison officers who were observing the testing. After the completion of all events, Lieutenant Commander James approached Sarah with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. He had been involved in SEAL selection for over a decade and had never seen a woman attempt the screening test, let alone pass it with such impressive margins. Lieutenant Commander explained that physical capability was only the first requirement for SEAL candidacy. The psychological demands of the training were designed to break down candidates and rebuild them with the mental toughness necessary for the most dangerous military missions. He wanted to understand what motivated Sarah to pursue this path and whether she truly comprehended what she was asking to be put through. Sarah's response was direct and thoughtful. She explained that she had spent her entire life preparing for challenges that others said were impossible for someone like her. She understood that SEAL training would be the most difficult thing she had ever attempted, but she believed that her background of overcoming skepticism and proving herself in hostile environments had prepared her for exactly this kind of test. She wasn't seeking to make a statement or prove a point about women in combat. She simply wanted to serve her country in the most demanding way possible. The conversation continued for over an hour as Lieutenant Commander probed her understanding of SEAL operations, her commitment to the extended training timeline, and her ability to handle situations where her teammates' lives might depend on her performance under extreme stress. By the end of their discussion, he was impressed enough to recommend her for the next phase of the selection process. The psychological evaluation proved to be more challenging than the physical test. Sarah spent 3 days undergoing interviews, written examinations, and scenario-based assessments designed to reveal how she would respond to stress, uncertainty, and moral dilemmas. The psychologists were particularly interested in her motivations for seeking SEAL training and her ability to maintain emotional stability in environments where traditional support systems wouldn't be available. One of the most difficult sessions involved scenario planning, where Sarah was presented with hypothetical mission situations and asked to explain her decision-making process. The scenarios were designed to have no clear right answers, forcing her to demonstrate how she would handle ambiguity and moral complexity while maintaining focus on mission objectives. Sarah approached each scenario methodically, showing her ability to consider multiple factors quickly and make decisive choices even when perfect information wasn't available. The final phase of her evaluation involved spending a week with active SEAL team members who were tasked with assessing her compatibility with the culture and demands of special operations. This was perhaps the most nerve-wracking part of the entire process, as Sarah knew that these men had earned their positions through the same brutal training she was hoping to attempt, and their opinions would carry enormous weight in determining her future. The SEAL team members put Sarah through a series of informal tests that went far beyond physical fitness. They evaluated her ability to remain calm under pressure, her willingness to take on unpleasant tasks without complaint, her capacity for learning complex procedures quickly, and her potential for building the kind of trust relationships that were essential for small unit operations. Most importantly, they observed how she handled situations where she was clearly the outsider in a tight-knit group. Master Chief Petty Officer Michael, who led the evaluation team, had been skeptical about the entire process from the beginning. In his 20-year career, he had seen countless male candidates who possessed impressive physical abilities and strong motivation fail during SEAL training because they lacked the mental resilience or character necessary for the program. He couldn't imagine how a woman, regardless of her capabilities, could survive training that was specifically designed to exploit every possible weakness. However, as the week progressed, Master Chief found his skepticism gradually giving way to grudging respect. Sarah demonstrated an ability to learn quickly, adapt to changing requirements, and maintain her performance standards even when she was obviously exhausted or frustrated. More importantly, she showed no signs of expecting special treatment or accommodation, instead consistently exceeding the standards that were set for her. The turning point came during a night training exercise where the evaluation team simulated a reconnaissance mission that went wrong. Sarah was tasked with providing medical treatment to a wounded team member while under simulated enemy fire and with limited supplies. The scenario was designed to test her ability to perform complex tasks while managing multiple stressors and time pressure. Sarah's performance during the exercise impressed even the most skeptical team members. She remained calm and focused while treating the simulated wounds, made efficient use of available supplies, and maintained situational awareness that allowed her to spot potential threats that other participants missed. When the exercise concluded, Master Chief acknowledged that her performance had been superior to many male candidates he had evaluated over the years. The final step in the selection process was a meeting with Captain David, the commanding officer who would make the ultimate decision about Sarah's admission to SEAL training. Captain had built his reputation on his ability to identify candidates who possessed the rare combination of physical capability, mental toughness, and character that made successful SEALs. He had reviewed Sarah's entire file, spoken with everyone involved in her evaluation, and was prepared to make a decision that he knew would attract significant attention. The meeting took place in Captain's office on a Friday afternoon, with Sarah wearing her dress uniform and carrying herself with the confidence she had developed over months of testing and evaluation. Captain began by acknowledging that her path to this point had been exceptional, and that her performance in every phase of evaluation had exceeded expectations. However, he wanted her to understand that SEAL training itself would be unlike anything she had experienced before. Captain explained that SEAL training had a failure rate of over 70%, even among carefully selected candidates who had already demonstrated exceptional abilities. The training was designed to simulate the worst possible conditions that SEALs might face in combat, and it pushed candidates beyond what they believed were their absolute limits. Many successful military personnel from other branches and specialties had attempted SEAL training and failed, not because they lacked ability, but because the program required a level of mental toughness that was extraordinarily rare. Sarah listened carefully to everything Captain said, but her response was unwavering. She had spent her entire life preparing for situations where others expected her to fail, and she had learned that her greatest strength was her ability to continue functioning when others reached their breaking point. She understood that SEAL training would be the most difficult challenge she had ever faced, but she believed that her background of overcoming skepticism and proving herself in hostile environments had prepared her for exactly this test. Captain studied her for several long moments before reaching into his desk drawer and withdrawing a set of orders. He explained that he was approving her admission to basic underwater demolition SEAL training, making her the first woman in history to be given this opportunity. However, he wanted her to understand that there would be no modifications to the training program and no allowances made for her gender. She would be expected to meet exactly the same standards as every male candidate, and failure would result in immediate dismissal from the program. As Sarah accepted the orders that would change her life forever, Captain offered one final piece of advice. He told her that the most successful SEAL candidates were those who focused not on surviving the training, but on proving to themselves and their instructors that they belonged among the elite warriors who wore the SEAL trident. The next 6 months would test everything she believed about herself, and only she could determine whether she had what it took to succeed. The first day of basic underwater demolition SEAL training at Naval Amphibious Base arrived with the kind of California morning that tourists traveled thousands of miles to experience. The sun was bright, the ocean was calm, and the temperature was perfect for outdoor activities. Sarah knew that the pleasant weather was deceptive. SEAL training was designed to be brutal regardless of environmental conditions, and the instructors had spent decades perfecting methods for breaking down even the most prepared candidates. Sarah arrived at the training facility at 5:30 in the morning, 30 minutes before the required reporting time. She wanted to be completely prepared for whatever the first day might bring, and she had learned from her military experience that being early was always better than being on time. As she stood in formation with 23 other candidates, she was acutely aware that she was the only woman in a group of men who had all survived the same rigorous selection process she had completed. The other candidates came from various military backgrounds, including Marine Force reconnaissance, Army Rangers, Air Force, and experienced Navy personnel. Each man had already proven himself in demanding military environments, and most had been preparing specifically for SEAL training for months or years. As they waited for the instructors to arrive, Sarah could feel curious glances in her direction, but no one spoke to her directly. Instructor Chief Petty Officer Robert Hayes appeared at exactly 6 o'clock, followed by a team of assistant instructors whose reputation for demanding excellence was legendary throughout the special operations community. Chief Hayes was a 20-year veteran of SEAL teams who had served in multiple combat deployments and had been training SEAL candidates for over 5 years. His first words to the assembled group were simple and direct. 24 people had started the day, but statistical probability suggested that fewer than 8 would successfully complete the program. The first week of training was designed to establish baseline fitness levels and introduce candidates to the physical standards they would need to maintain throughout the program. Every day began with a 4-mile run on the beach, followed by hours of calisthenics, swimming, and obstacle coursework. The pace was relentless, with instructors constantly pushing candidates to move faster, work harder, and maintain perfect form even as fatigue mounted. Sarah discovered that her months of preparation had served her well, but that SEAL training existed on a completely different level than anything she had previously experienced. The physical demands were severe enough that several candidates were injured during the first week, including stress fractures and muscle strains that required medical attention. More challenging than the physical requirements was the constant psychological pressure, applied by instructors who seemed determined to find each candidate's breaking point. The instructors paid particular attention to Sarah, not because they wanted her to fail, but because they needed to determine whether she could maintain her performance standards when subjected to the same pressures that had broken thousands of male candidates over the years. They assigned her additional responsibilities, critiqued her performance more harshly than others, and created situations designed to test her ability to function effectively when she was obviously being singled out for special attention. During the second week, the training intensity increased dramatically as candidates began learning the technical skills that formed the foundation of SEAL operations. They spent hours in the ocean learning advanced swimming techniques, practiced small boat operations in challenging surf conditions and began working with explosive devices and weapon systems. The combination of physical exhaustion and complex skill development created a level of stress that began to separate the most resilient candidates from those who were approaching their limits. It was during this period that Sarah first noticed the small tattoo on her left shoulder blade beginning to attract attention from the instructors. The tattoo was a simple design that incorporated symbols representing her family's military service, her commitment to service, and her belief in perseverance through adversity. She had gotten the tattoo during her final week of high school as a personal reminder of the values that would guide her through military service. The tattoo featured an eagle with outstretched wings, beneath which were inscribed the words honor, courage, commitment in small script lettering. Below the text was a series of small stars representing family members who had served in various military branches, including her grandfather's service in Vietnam, her father's Army career, and her uncle's time in the Marine Corps. The design was meaningful to Sarah as a representation of the legacy she was trying to uphold, but she had no idea that it would eventually play a crucial role in her SEAL training experience. Chief Hayes first noticed the tattoo during a swimming exercise when candidates were required to remove their shirts for water safety reasons. He observed the design carefully, but made no comment at the time, continuing to focus on the training requirements and candidate performance. However, Sarah began to notice that he seemed to be paying closer attention to her interactions with other candidates and her response to particularly challenging training evolutions. The real test came during the third week of training when candidates faced their first major elimination event. The exercise was a timed ocean swim in rough surf conditions, followed immediately by a 2-mile beach run and an obstacle course that had to be completed while wearing wet uniforms and boots filled with sand. The entire evolution was designed to test candidates' ability to maintain performance standards when they were exhausted, uncomfortable, and operating under extreme time pressure. Sarah completed the swimming portion of the test in excellent time, despite fighting through surf conditions that had caused several other candidates to struggle significantly. As she emerged from the water and began the running portion of the event, she noticed that one of the other candidates, a former Marine named David, was clearly in distress, had developed severe muscle cramps during the swim, and was barely able to maintain forward progress during the run. The SEAL training philosophy emphasized individual performance and the principle that each candidate was responsible for meeting standards without assistance from others. However, Sarah had learned from her previous military experience that true leadership sometimes required making decisions that prioritized team success over individual achievement. As she passed during the run, she made a split-second decision that would define her entire training experience. Instead of continuing at her own pace, Sarah slowed down and began running alongside, offering encouragement and guidance that helped him maintain the minimum pace required to avoid elimination. She knew that helping another candidate could potentially compromise her own performance, but she believed that demonstrating loyalty and commitment to fellow warriors was more important than achieving the best possible individual time. Chief Hayes and the other instructors observed this interaction carefully, noting both Sarah's decision to help a struggling teammate and her ability to do so without significantly compromising her own performance. As the candidates completed the obstacle course and gathered for debriefing, Chief Hayes announced that everyone had successfully completed the evolution, but that several important lessons had been demonstrated about leadership, teamwork, and the values that define successful SEAL operators. After the formal debriefing concluded, Chief Hayes approached Sarah privately and asked her to remain behind while the other candidates returned to their barracks. Sarah was initially concerned that she was about to be criticized for her decision to help, but Chief Hayes's demeanor suggested that the conversation would be more complex than a simple reprimand. Chief Hayes began by acknowledging that Sarah's performance during the training had been exceptional and that she was clearly meeting all physical and technical standards required for SEAL candidates. However, he wanted to discuss her decision to assist during the elimination event and understand the thought process that had led to her choice. Sarah explained that she had grown up in a military family where she learned that the mission always came first, but that the mission included ensuring that every team member had the opportunity to succeed. She believed that her role as a potential SEAL included demonstrating the kind of leadership and loyalty that would be essential during actual combat operations, where team members would need to depend on each other in life-or-death situations. Chief Hayes listened to her explanation without comment, then asked her to remove her training shirt so that he could examine her tattoo more closely. Sarah was surprised by the request, but standing at attention while Chief Hayes studied the design and text that decorated her shoulder blade. After several moments of examination, Chief Hayes stepped back and asked Sarah to explain the meaning of her tattoo and why she had chosen to permanently mark herself with those particular symbols and words. Sarah described the military history of her family, her commitment to the values represented by the eagle and text, and her belief that the tattoo served as a constant reminder of the standards she had committed to upholding throughout her military service. Chief Hayes nodded slowly and then shared something that Sarah had not expected to hear. He explained that he had been observing her performance throughout the training not just to evaluate her individual capabilities, but to determine whether she truly understood what it meant to be part of a SEAL team. The tattoo, combined with her decision to help, had demonstrated that she possessed the kind of character and commitment that distinguished successful SEALs from other elite military personnel. He went on to explain that SEAL training was designed not just to test physical capabilities, but to identify candidates who could be trusted with the lives of their teammates during the most dangerous military operations. Sarah's willingness to sacrifice her own performance to help a struggling teammate, despite knowing that such actions carried risks, demonstrated exactly the kind of loyalty and leadership that SEAL teams required. Chief Hayes then revealed something that surprised Sarah even more. The tattoo on her shoulder blade was similar to one that he had gotten during his own military service, and the values it represented were identical to those that had guided his own career as a SEAL operator. He had been waiting throughout the training to see whether Sarah would demonstrate through her actions that she truly believed in the principles she had chosen to permanently display on her body. The conversation concluded with Chief Hayes informing Sarah that she had passed a crucial test that most candidates never realized they were taking. Her combination of individual excellence and commitment to team success had convinced the instructor staff that she possessed the rare qualities necessary for SEAL operations. However, he warned her that the most difficult portions of the training still lay ahead, and that her performance during the coming weeks would ultimately determine whether she earned the right to wear the SEAL trident. As Sarah returned to the barracks that evening, she reflected on the unexpected turn her training had taken. She had expected SEAL training to test her physical capabilities, mental toughness, and technical skills, but she hadn't anticipated that her personal values and character would be evaluated in such detail. The realization that her instructors had been watching not just what she could do, but who she was as a person, gave her a new understanding of what it truly meant to be a SEAL. The remaining weeks of training brought challenges that tested everything Sarah had learned about herself over the years of preparation and months of military service. Hell Week arrived with its legendary 5 days of continuous training, minimal sleep, and constant physical and mental pressure, designed to eliminate candidates who lacked the absolute commitment necessary for SEAL operations. Sarah survived Hell Week through a combination of physical preparation, mental toughness, and the support of teammates who had come to respect her abilities and character. When the final evolution concluded, and she found herself among the 8 candidates who remained from the original class of 24, she understood that she had achieved something that no woman in military history had ever accomplished. The graduation ceremony was attended by senior Navy leadership, Sarah's family, and SEAL team members who had heard about the historic nature of her achievement. As Chief Hayes presented her with the SEAL trident that represented her membership in one of the most elite military organizations in the world, Sarah thought about the long journey that had brought her to this moment. From the teenage girl who had been dismissed by skeptics in her first youth training program, through the countless hours of preparation and testing, to the moment when a seasoned SEAL instructor had seen her tattoo and recognized the character it represented, Sarah had proven that excellence and commitment could overcome any barrier. She was no longer just the first woman to complete SEAL training. She was a SEAL, ready to serve her country alongside the finest warriors the military could produce.